Mississauga, Ontario, Tuesday, December 4th, 2001, 6:15 a.m. A 21-officer Peel Regional Police Tactical Unit, coordinating with the RCMP's Airport Investigations Division, takes the front door of a detached house on Erin Mills Parkway off its hinges in under 4 seconds. The date matters. Just weeks earlier, a catastrophic act of terrorism had rewritten the rules of airport security across North America overnight, and Toronto Pearson sits at that moment under intense joint scrutiny from US and Canadian transport authorities. Any hole in airport security is being read as a potential national security failure, not ordinary theft. That's why 21 tactical officers and a battering ram are sent after a 48-year-old truck driver in his pajamas. They find Hoa Lam Ong sitting up in bed in blue pajamas beside his wife, Teresa. He doesn't resist or run. He puts his hands on his head. He's smiling, as he always is, according to every Pearson warehouse worker who's met him. Smiling 6 weeks ago, handing a clerk named Danny an envelope of $3,000. Smiling now as officers open his closet. The closet is stuffed with shoeboxes. One holds about $42,000 in banded bills. More follow. A drawer holds $22,000 US in $500 notes. The mattress, cut open, yields 340,000 Canadian dollars in vacuum-sealed packages across 3 cavities. A laundry bag of dirty shirts hides another $180,000. The tactical sergeant later summed it up in his incident report. There was cash in every room of the house except the child's bedroom, and I would not, at this point, rule out the child's bedroom. At the end of the hallway, in a spare bedroom, they find an elderly man in ochre robes chanting quietly in Mandarin, a Buddhist monk from outside Guangzhou, flown in 4 months earlier at Hoa Lam Ong's expense and paid roughly $18,000 a month. His job has been to spiritually cleanse the house of the karmic debt generated by 13 years of theft. Hoa Lam Ong has personally organized the physical theft of roughly $6 million US in consumer electronics from Toronto Pearson's freight terminals using a bribed insider network that peaked at 14 people. He's a truck driver. His declared annual income is $21,480. He is, at that moment, one of the most consequential single-operator cargo thieves in North American aviation history. And by every officer's account, one of the most likable. He doesn't stop smiling. In the late 1980s, Toronto Pearson handled about 840,000 tons of air freight a year, and had spent nearly $240 million on perimeter security, fencing, CCTV, patrols, ID checks, making it one of the hardest perimeters in the Western Hemisphere to breach from outside. Internally, it was archaic. Cargo landed and moved by forklift onto pallets in one of 11 ground handling buildings, tracked on hand-completed carbon-triplicate paper forms by night shift clerks earning about $15 an hour. If a pallet's form was never filed, that pallet formally didn't exist. No automated pallet-level tracking existed at Pearson until 2003. For 15 years, the cargo operation of Canada's largest airport ran on the honesty of roughly 780 warehouse clerks, earning under $16 an hour. Hoa Lam Ong understood this earlier and more clearly than anyone. By summer 1988, he also knew he wasn't going to fix his finances driving a leased truck for $400 a week. He started throwing barbecues. Born June 1953 in Kangeok, Long An Province, south of Saigon, a rice farmer's son, one of 7 children, 6 years of schooling before working the paddy fields. In April 1975, at 22, he was in Saigon for the fall of South Vietnam. He escaped by fishing boat to a Malaysian refugee camp on Bedong Island, spent 14 months there, and was accepted for Canadian resettlement in September 1976. He landed in Toronto on October 14, 1976, aged 23, with no English and a single airline blanket around his shoulders. Settlement house in Parkdale, English classes, years of low-wage manual work. In 1980, he got his Ontario Class A trucking license and was hired by Transcontinental Air Freight Services, a Mississauga freight forwarder with ground handling contracts at Pearson, $400 a week. He met his wife, Teresa, also a Vietnamese refugee, at a Parkdale church function in 1983. She had a 2-year-old son, Benny, and worked in the same company's accounts receivable department. They married in 1984. He adopted Benny the following year. His co-workers nicknamed him Smiley. He smiled through customs secondary inspections, through his dispatcher screaming at him for being late, through every documented interaction across 13 years. Nobody who worked with him recalled him ever raising his voice. 2 forensic psychiatrists who examined him in 2002 called it the most weaponized, consistent surface affect either had seen in a commercial fraud case. The smile wasn't a personality trait. It was a disarmament system. Summer 1988. Hoa Lam Ong bought a stainless steel 8-burner propane barbecue for $1,940 cash and started hosting free weekly Saturday cookouts at his Meadowvale bungalow for fellow Pearson ground handling workers, clerks, forklift operators, supervisors, customs brokers, cargo agents, families included. By summer's end, roughly 40 different workers had attended at least once. He listened, more intently, the Peel Regional Police later said, than any informant the unit had ever run. He learned who had gambling debts at Casino Rama, who was behind on a mortgage, who was quietly running a second household abroad. By winter 1988, he'd identified about 11 workers whose finances made them, in intelligence recruitment terms, actionable. He approached the first, a clerk named Danny, behind on child support, in January 1989. Offering $2,000 cash to leave 1 pallet off 1 manifest for 1 incoming KLM flight. Danny took it. 3 nights later, Hoa Lam Ong backed his truck up to collect a legitimate load of Dutch flower bulbs, and Danny loaded an unlogged pallet of 480 Toshiba laptops worth about $84,000 alongside it. Hoa Lam Ong drove out on paperwork that only mentioned the bulbs. The laptops formally didn't exist. By the end of 1989, the operation was an industrial routine. By 1990, the method was stable. Teresa, working her way into handling inbound manifests at Transcontinental, photocopied records of specific high-value electronics shipments each morning and drove them home at lunch. Hoa Lam Ong called the relevant bribed clerk with coded instructions, a pallet number, a dock, an insertion order that took Peel Regional Police wiretap analysts 4 months to decode. That night, the clerk would omit the pallet from the ledger or mark it empty ULD returned to airline pool. Days later, when Hoa Lam Ong arrived for a legitimate scheduled pickup, the Phantom Pallet went onto the truck alongside it, off every document. The standard bribe was $3,000 a pallet. A single pallet of Intel semiconductors sold gray market for $90,000 to $140,000 in the early 90s. At its 1994 to 98 peak, the operation moved 2 to 3 unlogged pallets a week. Across 13 years, about 640 Phantom Pallet extractions, over $6 million in cumulative turnover, 14 insiders across 4 ground handling agents, not one of whom ever informed on him. The barbecues never stopped. By mid-1993, 2 people couldn't run it alone, so Hoa Lam Ong brought in his stepson. Benny, legally adopted in 1985, 12 years old that spring, started tagging along on weekend visits to warehouse units rented under fake corporate names across Etobicoke, Rexdale, and Brampton, watching his adoptive father unload Phantom Pallets and meet gray market buyers. By 1997, at 16, Benny was registered as sole director of 2 numbered Ontario shell companies used to invoice the resale. By 1999, at 18, he handled most buyer communications, forged invoices, and ran pickup logistics, becoming, by 2001, the only name on any paper trail back to the operation. Hoa Lam Ong's name appeared nowhere in it, deliberately, Peel investigators later concluded. If it ever surfaced, Benny would be arrested first. Benny had just turned 20 at his father's arrest, having been operationally involved since age 12. a circumstance the Crown later judged sufficient to drop any case against him. Crown notes recorded his father's own explanation in one line. He said the police would never look at a kid. By spring 2001, Hoa Lam Ong was frightened, not of police, his workforce, or his customers, all of whom had been reliable for 13 years, but of his ancestors. A practicing Mahayana Buddhist since childhood in Long An, he'd kept a daily meditation practice at a home altar for 25 years and genuinely believed every dishonest act accrued a karmic debt payable in this life or the next. By early 2001, he estimated that debt at roughly 1,000 pallets worth of stolen electronics and believed it was accelerating. He'd begun having vivid visions of his own future reincarnations as animals of falling status: a stray dog, a rat, a river worm. He decided the situation needed professional intervention and had an uncle in Guangzhou find a senior Pure Land monk willing to relocate to Canada for pay. The candidate, 73, from a monastery outside Foshan, had spent 51 years in monastic seclusion. He agreed to come for 18,000 Canadian dollars a month, cash. He arrived at Pearson, the same terminal complex his employer had been robbing for 13 years, on August 6, 2001, and was installed in the Meadowvale House's spare bedroom to conduct continuous karmic cleansing rituals. Chanting, incense, a brass gong every 3 hours, and the daily Amitabha prayer sequence of Pure Land Buddhism. Neither man ever seems to have named the irony in this. Pure Land teaching holds that reciting Amitabha's name, Nyanpho, purifies karma through sincere devotion, but Buddhist ethics also holds that paying for religious service with stolen wealth doesn't cleanse it. It compounds the offense, contaminating the Sangha. Scholars who later studied the case called it a closed loop. The more he stole, the more he needed to pay the monk to absolve it, and the more he paid the monk, the more he needed to steal to cover it. In the next room, over those same 4 months, Benny and 2 associates were unpacking and repackaging roughly 340 stolen Toshiba, Compaq, Dell, and IBM laptops from a July 2001 KLM shipment. The gong was audible through the wall. The monk, by his own account, never understood the true source of his employer's karmic debt. He believed he'd been hired to cleanse the karma of a hard-working trucking family. And every officer who later interviewed him called him one of the most spiritually serene people they'd ever met. He was released without charge within 72 hours of the raid. Canadian law requires proof of criminal intent, and investigators concluded he'd genuinely believed he was performing ordinary religious service with no knowledge of the money's source. His $18,000 a month cash payments technically counted as proceeds of crime, but out of deference to his religious standing and the absence of intent, the RCMP didn't seize his belongings and even paid for his return ticket to China. He returned to Foshan in January 2002 and never spoke publicly about the 4 months in Meadowvale. Financially illiterate, no offshore accounts, no shells, no laundering services, no crypto, still theoretical in 2001, Hoa Lam Ong simply converted proceeds into physical cash and stored it across his 4 Greater Toronto properties. The December 4th raid recovered $1,140,000 Canadian dollars in 73 shoeboxes, $380,000 sewn into 6 mattresses, $220,000 US dollars in dirty shirts and laundry bags, $52,000 in freezer bags in the fridge, $18,000 US dollars inside a hollowed-out Buddhist prayer book on the family altar. Total, roughly $1.85 million. The Tactical Commander's report noted no discernible systematic organizational principle beyond apparent randomness. Hoa Lam Ong later admitted he'd just hidden cash wherever there was space. He never knew exactly how much he had and never counted. It ended with a small transaction. By mid-2001, Benny had a standing arrangement selling bulk laptops and components at about 30% of wholesale to Toronto Discount PC, a Scarborough strip mall shop whose owner claimed not to know the merchandise's source. On November 16, 2001, 4 Scarborough teenagers with no connection to the Ongs broke into the shop and stole about $42,000 in laptops, hard drives, and Intel components. The frightened owner, worried less about the burglary than about owing inventory to Benny's family, reported it to Toronto police. A routine responding officer asked for stolen serial numbers. The owner supplied 11 from stolen hard drives. Run through the Canadian Police Information Centre database, all 11 came back red-flagged within seconds, missing from a KLM Amsterdam to Pearson shipment logged 9 weeks earlier, per an insurance claim filed with Swiss Re. Since the underlying theft traced back to Pearson in Peel Region, the case was referred to Peel Regional Police's Commercial Crime Unit, which opened Operation Talon on November 19, 2001. 10 days of surveillance, photographing Benny's pickups, cross-referencing plates, led to a search warrant on the Meadowvale house on December 3rd, executed at 6:15 the next morning. Hoa Lam Ong put his hands on his head. He was still smiling. Hoa Lam Ong, Teresa, and Benny were charged December 8, 2001 in Brampton with organized commercial theft, possession of proceeds of crime, and conspiracy. Peel's case against Hoa Lam Ong personally was strong. Against Teresa and Benny, it was weak. Her manifest photocopying was tangled inside a legitimate job function that would take 4 to 6 years to forensically untangle across 640 Phantom Pallet cross-references. And Benny's involvement since age 12 badly complicated any adult premeditation argument. Within 72 hours, Hoa Lam Ong struck a plea: full personal responsibility for the entire 13-year operation, on the record that Teresa had been coerced by threats of domestic violence and Benny exploited from childhood by an adoptive parent he couldn't resist. In exchange for surrendering every asset, 4 properties, all recovered cash, vehicles, remaining inventory, and dropped charges against his wife and son. Formalized March 14, 2002, the surrendered assets were valued at roughly $3.5 to $6 million, split by Ontario between the Attorney General's operating budget and the Victim Services Fund's forensic technology upgrades. The case became the textbook argument for scrapping the paper system Hoa Lam Ong had exploited. By 2004, Transport Canada had replaced paper airside access with the biometric Restricted Access Identity Card. And by 2003 to 2004, Air Canada Cargo had eliminated paper manifests for end-to-end digital barcode tracking down to the individual pallet. Investigators half-jokingly credited the case with making the whole industry grow up. On May 22, 2002, Hoa Lam Ong was sentenced to 40 months at Beaver Creek Institution in Gravenhurst, nicknamed Club Fed in Canadian media, a fenceless minimum security facility historically holding nonviolent offenders, disgraced politicians, and white-collar fraudsters. He served about 24 months, gardening and working the prison laundry, and was paroled in spring 2004. Teresa and Benny were never prosecuted. He returned to a rented Markham apartment, permanently barred from trucking, freight, or any airport-adjacent industry, and worked from 2004 to 2019 as a dishwasher and then assistant kitchen manager at a Vietnamese restaurant on Yonge Street, never earning more than $34,000 a year. He retired in 2019 at 66. In 2026, he's 73, still in a rented Markham apartment, with Teresa, 70. Retired Peel officers who worked the case still privately suspect a chunk of his cash, maybe $1 to $2 million in currency and gold, was never recovered. The rumor persists that it's buried in pits somewhere in Ontario. In roughly 11 media interviews since his 2004 release, Hoa Lam Ong has denied any hidden reserves. He smiles while denying it. That smile, in a rented Markham apartment in 2026, is the case's open ending. A genuinely poor man, or a rich one who never declared it?